Okay, I have a brutal infatuation with base model tech, and I love pushing base model tech as far as it can possibly go. I also happen to have a brutal obsession with thin and light tech, and naturally, of course, this new MacBook Neo nails both of these categories. Now, spoiler for the rest of this video, if I'm just being completely honest. If you're in the market for any type of computer, not just a laptop, but any computer in general, this comes in as an easy recommendation. And it's almost sort of a disruptor in the entire computer space, to say the least. And in the grand scheme of tech in general, this is an automatic win, not just in the Apple MacBook space, but also tech in general for laptops and such, because the bar has been risen, meaning we're also going to see some dope ass Windows equivalents in the next couple of years. So I love to see it. Honestly, at $599 US or $499 for students, this is by far the computer to get over the next year or two, I can imagine. So it ends up being an incredible value. Naturally, as well, as somebody who is a gamer, and despite this not being a gaming laptop, I gotta touch on it. You most definitely can actually game on here, which is wild to say. Just don't expect any crazy performance really, but if you're just picking up a laptop for creative work, for school, for everyday things, the fact that this can also game is flipping badass. Likewise, for any budding creatives, editing video, music production, photography, whatever the case, this becomes an absolute grand slam for anybody starting out. Now, as for why this is a little bit more special in the first place, is because the Apple space naturally as well has been absolutely expensive. The barrier to entry to getting into the Mac space is pretty pricey. Of course, we have, the normal Mac Mini, or maybe even the MacBook Air, but those are both more expensive than this. Maybe not the Mac Mini, I'll have to double check that, but the Mac Mini is just a computer. You don't have the display, you don't have the peripherals, all that stuff. So the Mac Neo ends up being an incredible value proposition. And even when you do take a look at the whole $599 space for Windows laptops, A, they're probably not going to perform nearly as good as the MacBook Neo, but B, they also don't look or feel as good as the MacBook Neo, which is why this ends up being a little bit more special. The second thing I think is why this is more special as well is because there's a lot of hype surrounding it, because Apple machines are really just flipping good, plain and simple. Whether or not you care for Windows or Mac or whatever, they are good machines. And again, their previous price point makes them almost inaccessible, plain and simple, for most people. And the difference here is that this MacBook Neo makes Apple machines accessible to so many people. A lot of people simply cannot buy into the whole Apple ecosystem, whether that's going to be their phones, the Mac side of things, whatever the case is. Apple is pricey, and while this can still be relatively expensive person to person, a lot more people are now able to access these creative tools that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to in the past, and it's just awesome to see. For example, the first skateboard you might ever get, or the first art set you'll ever get, or even just, a basic ass DJ set is typically the things that people might get, and they might stick with those hobbies and crafts and arts and whatever the case is. And in this case, this is likely going to be that first laptop that people are going to be getting, and the capability of the system at this price that it is just really makes it special. So while I might definitely sound like a bit of a fanboy over this system, I don't care, because this sort of system is a game changer, and again, that bar has been reset. And the fact that this simply exists means that all other laptops, I guess in this price range, have to compete. But to dive a little bit further into the actual performance of the system, why it's so badass, let me start by saying that it is an entire package right off the bat. And I'll get to all the other stuff like the mic and the camera and the keyboard and the speakers and all that stuff. But I want to talk a little bit about the performance and how the A18 Pro chip has done. Personally, I thought honestly that it would be a little bit worse than the M1 MacBook series, for example. I actually started this YouTube channel on an M1 MacBook Air, I think it was. And this easily holds up by comparing it to my M1 iMac. And I'd say it's probably on par with the performance. Granted, my M1 MacBook Air and my M1 iMac that I still use on the regular were a lot more expensive when I bought them. This entire video, for example, was shot on my full-frame Lumix cinema camera in 4K. And this system absolutely edited it without any sort of issues, which is purely obscene for a device of this price point. If anybody is a bit of a wannabe filmmaker, or even if you're just considering, starting YouTube for anything, definitely consider this laptop as your starting point, because it is interesting how well it performs. Scrubbing my timelines, I didn't have any issues. Color grading, no issues. Simply just working with this from a tactile perspective, there has been absolutely zero issues with it, and I wasn't really expecting that. Just the simple fact that this system does as well as it does at the price that it is makes it so that this will actually be the system people will purchase and fall in love with creative arts to begin. And let's not just romanticize all the creative stuff, because obviously that's what Mac is sort of known for. But some people just need a flipping computer to do the everyday things. The mom and dad who want to pay the household bills, browse the web, watch movies, whatever. The student Obviously, he's going to be doing any sort of homework on here. Some people might literally use this to do the accounting for their small business. All these simple things, naturally, you don't really have to mention them, but they can be done on here. And that's not where it stops. And of course, it's kind of boring to talk about those things because almost every inexpensive Chromebook can do all that, as well as the Windows machines that are effectively probably cheaper than this for the most part, but this does do a whole lot more as well, which is the badass thing about it. And the reason why it's so hype is because base model tech like this has simply never been better. And amazingly enough, if you're considering on gaming and you don't already have something to game on, technically this can do it. Now, of course, like I mentioned, this is definitely not meant for gaming. You're not buying it for specifically gaming, but it actually can. It's not going to do as well naturally as something else that does gaming specifically, but when I do throw open a game like World of Warcraft, for example, it can do it. A common game that students love to play, and myself included, Sims 4, works like a flippin' charm, and it can do it. And then you can throw down some more intensive games like Baldur's Gate 3, for example, which is supposed to technically have 16 gigs of RAM as the minimum base point, but it actually runs really well on the 8 gigs that this has. So again, a little bit surprising on that side. And then you have, I don't know if it's optimization or what, but then you have games like flippin' Cyberpunk 2077 that can still run on here. And that is absolutely bonkers. So if you are trying to casually or just get into gaming in general, the fact that this actually can handle it is a bit surprising. And let's not forget about, things like Game Pass. If you are okay with cloud gaming, just having an all-in-one system that has the speakers, that has the display, that you can connect a Bluetooth controller to, this does all the cloud gaming in the world if you needed to. Now, of course, when it comes down to gaming, there are going to be limitations on here. This is a Mac, so you're not going to get those Windows-specific games. Like, I love Overwatch and I love Marvel Rivals. I can't get it on there. I'm sure some smarter people than me have probably figured it out by now, but you can't get them on there. Now, there are going to be things like crossover and parallels. I'll save that for another day because that is a whole other can of worms. But in terms of limitations, it's still just a Mac when it comes down to gaming. So you're going to be sticking with the native games, any sort of AAA ports that they've had over here, or otherwise you're going to have to go down a whole technical aspect to get those games that you want. But to drive the point home though, if you are just trying to casually game or start gaming or need something to game on, this can do it. Performance-wise, naturally, of course, it's impressive, like I mentioned, but what about all the other things that this thing has to offer? First thing, of course, is the keyboard. It's actually pretty damn good. There's no backlighting on here if you really do need to type in the dark, so you might want to find some light in that case, but beyond that, the keys feel identical to my MacBook Air, which is definitely not a bad thing. I recently went back to using chiclet style keyboards because I think I sort of talked myself into loving mechanical so much, but the keys are dope on here, and I really do like chiclet style keys. And of course, also, if you are getting the 512 gigs of storage on here, you're gonna get Touch ID. I flippin' love Touch ID. As for the trackpad though, it does not have any sort of haptic clicks. Of course, if you even care about that or know the difference, pretty much if you pressed on the button before, it would sort of vibrate to make it feel like, but wasn't really actually a button. In this case, this button actually does physically travel, but it has all the other gestures you might need, like scrolling, swiping, 3-finger pinching and stuff. It's all there if you need it. And as for the display, there are no fancy HDR or display gammas. This is just an sRGB display, but it is beyond fine watching shows and gaming and whatever else you might need on it. And again, if you are a bit of a wannabe filmmaker, a lot of people don't have a fancy screen when they watch content. So if you do want to practice color grading or just editing videos on here, the sRGB screen, I promise you it's absolutely fine. And again, because this system overall is just really power efficient, the battery is seemingly good for all the tests I've been doing over the last week or so. And really, I find battery tests dumb as hell. Whatever I'm doing on my MacBook Neo is going to be totally different than what you'd be doing on here. So just be mindful of people talking about battery tests. Again, I'm putting this thing through it when it comes down to my usage, and the battery's still holding up okay, if that means anything to you. At the end of it though, just plug it in. There is a Type-C port here, you can plug it in, and Apple actually did include a charger in the box, so well done Apple. Again, considering this is going to be a lot of people's first laptop, that charger better stay in there, so thank you for having it in there, I guess. And another thing to talk about here is going to be the storage. And look, I have to say it, if you are doing any sort of creative arts, photography, music production, film, whatever it is, get the 512. Find a way to get an extra $100 and swing it towards doubling your storage. It does go a long way. 256 is kind of slim. Plus, again, that Touch ID, flippin' love Touch ID. But again, if you are just a normal student, everyday user, doing everyday tasks, basic, whatever it is, 256 is absolutely fine, especially if you're going to be leaning into any sort of iCloud subscriptions with the storage. Other than that, I can recommend highly getting the 512. It is one of those things that ends up going a long way, especially with the prices of SSDs and storage right now. If you were to buy an external SSD, it would likely be a good chunk more expensive than $100 at this point in time. So yeah, definitely consider it. As well, the cool thing about this whole system as well is that it just looks badass, especially at this price point. It is built literally probably the best in the entire bracket, and it has no business looking this good or feeling as good as it does. And for me, I did end up getting this citrus because I'm a wannabe minimalist. I always got these blacks and grays and silvers and all that. So this punch of color, I finally bit the bullet to check it out. And I do really dig the citrus. It kind of looks cool. But I love that there are other colors and stuff. So they did a good job with that. The crazy thing is that a bit of a concern, the fact that it's built so well that if there's going to be companies or schools buying these up, the thing about metal is that it bends, it dings, it scratches, and it ends up not looking so hot. The thing is about plastic, it just bonks and bounces. You might get a chip here or there, but when it comes down to metal, man, I don't think this is going to fare too well for students. Everybody else who's not going to be rough on their systems, though, are going to absolutely love it. I know people buy cases for their MacBooks anyways, so that's always a good thing to get. From a weight perspective as well, it actually almost feels identical to my MacBook Air. I can't really tell a difference, but it does end up being a little bit smaller, and I love this. I love small tech, a smaller footprint, and maybe this is a little bit thicker, but overall, it's smaller than my M4 MacBook Air, if not a little bit thicker. But yeah, I love how tiny this thing is. For anybody traveling, this will probably fit perfectly on those tiny ass airplane trays. So I love that. Compared to my 11-inch iPad Pro, this does actually end up being a good chunk larger if you're going to be, considering an iPad. And I'm actually going to be comparing this to an iPad, I think, in the next coming weeks, because I know some people are considering it. I honestly think the Mac Neo is probably the better option unless you're doing stuff with the Apple Pencil. Especially at the price. But in terms of the ports, again, it's 2026, so everybody's sort of gotten used to Type-C by now. We've all been living that dongle life. So you already know there's only 2 Type-C ports on here, one of which is going to be faster than the other. I don't think a lot of people are actually going to care about this, frankly, but the rear one on the back end here is a USB 3.0. So if you are transferring files, for example, or just using an SSD, if you do already have one, the rear Type-C port will be a lot faster. And of course, there is one more port here. That's going to be the headphone jack. This isn't the fancy high impedance headphone jack that I've been using on my MacBook Air, for example. Not that I can really tell the difference all too much, but if you need to plug in some headphones, it's there if you need it. Now, if I sound like a broken record, at $599, this thing's absolutely bonkers, and it's still an entire package. And what I mean by that is you got the display, you've got the keyboard, you've got the microphone, you've got the speakers. It's all flipping there, and I love that. Naturally, of course, that makes me sound dumb as hell because it's a laptop. It has to all be there, really. But it's just the quality of it. Talking about the camera on here is not good. For $599 though, it is good. That goes the same for the microphone and the speakers. They're not good. But at $599, they're really flipping good. Typically in this space, you get almost garbage tier usability from those items. So the camera, if you're going to be FaceTiming or you're logging in for, a video for class or whatever, it's going to be there. It works perfectly fine. I dig it. As for the microphone, this is where you're going to have to do a little bit extra work to make them sound excellent. Again, if you're recording your voice using these mics, hop into your closet with a whole ton of clothes. It'll help dampen it, remove any sort of echoes, reverberations. The microphone will hold up perfectly well. And of those 3 things, between the camera, the mic, and the speakers I think are going to be the better ones. They are side firing and they get plenty loud. But again, for a cheap laptop, they're good. In the grand scheme of speakers, they're not that great. Just something to be mindful of and to temper your expectations, because this is still considered a budget machine. And yeah, where this gets interesting for me is that I'm really curious how the whole Windows, tech space is going to react to this system, mainly because when you're in that $500, $600 price point range, you're not getting anything near the quality and the performance of this. So we'll see how that goes. I can say that this sort of feels like another M1 chip moment, if anybody sort of remembers that. If anybody remembers when the M1 launched, I guess there was a little bit of a catch-up period because those were some incredible systems. A lot of people are still kicking around with the M1 series. Again, I still have my iMac in my living room. That is an M1 chip, and it's still kicking it today. Does incredibly well. Again, this feels like one of those moments. The MacBook Neo is an absolute banger of a machine. Again, if you're a gamer, this isn't a gaming system. It's not Windows, and if you do want to play Windows games in here, you got to work for it. But if you are just a casual gamer with some basic ass games, native games, some of the AAA ports, this can do it, and I flippin' love that. If you're started creative, there's nothing better to start with that I can recommend. I can definitely say that 8 gigabytes of RAM on a Mac is a whole lot different than 8 gigs of RAM on a Windows machine, and Apple really did do a good job with this system. The best thing too is that you could pick this up and it might not actually be good enough for you. You might maybe need something a little bit more, and that's why I guess the MacBook Air exists. So you can always go that way, but pick this up, start with this one. If it doesn't work, return it. And yeah, you might want to go back to Windows if this ends up being your first Mac, who knows? But yeah, that's my perspective from a tired ass gamer dad who does accounting work and creative stuff. And yeah, this ends up being an excellent option for anybody looking for a MacBook. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this thing. I'd love to hear down in the comment section. I appreciate you guys watching till the end. Till next time.